Okay, so today we're going to be making homemade chicken soup for the kids for lunch. You might hear them in the background, you might not. But I'm going to start with put a daub of olive oil in there. I'm going to turn it up to about medium high. That's on 6 for my, and I'm going to smush these. This is a clove of garlic. I like garlic. Get 2 of them. So if I squish these, what happens is they get smushed and the paper comes right off. So I do that with the other one. Paper came right off. And I'll smush them again. And what that'll do is I'll smush them again, make them thin. And make it easier to slice them this way. Now I don't have to make them into the dinkiest little pieces in the world, but I want to cut them up to, small enough to where they look chopped up. Okay. So if you don't want to do this, you can always get the pre-chopped onion or garlic, but I like to do my own because it's cheaper and faster. And put that in there. And while that's getting ready to sizzle, and hopefully before it starts to burn, I'm going to cut up this half of an onion, which I've gone through and I've cut through this way first to the root end, and then I cut this way so it can kind of chop at the same time. I don't have to worry about doing too much with my fingers. And I just cut off the ends, that last bit, and throw that away. Now wait for this to heat up a little bit. I need to hear that sizzle. Make sure that garlic, yeah, there we go. There's that sizzle. That garlic's in there. I got my spatula because I like to use spatulas. Put the rest of the onions in there. Try to clean up any messes that you make in the meanwhile. Okay, and while those two are starting to cook up a bit, a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. The salt's going to help to release the moisture in the onion. It's going to help to cook it up faster and better. Okay, so I'm going to celery sticks. Okay, so I'm not going to use the bottom part here all the way down, but I am going to use the top. And so I don't have to chop them up individually. I'm going to go ahead and slice them this way. So I slice them the long way down. The same with this one. Always use a sharp knife. Okay. I'm going to cut off the ends because I don't know where they've been. Okay, and then I'm going to chop these. Always keep your fingers out of the way. You don't want to cut those up. Okay, and I'm going to go down to about right there because that part starts to get tough and dry. Okay, start this up again. That's starting to smell really good. And that means my cue to put in the celery. Okay, then I don't want, because my kids get these all the time and they usually don't eat them all, so I'm going to use these. I don't want to cut them up too small, but I don't want them quite that big. I'm going to cut them in like thirds. And so make me go to 4. And then I'll put them there as I'm going along. I'm not a chef, as you can see. I don't have fancy ninja knife skills. But I've been cooking for families that are like 14 for a very long time. We got a large family. Alright, so that goes in there. So I'm making chicken alphabet noodle soup. Okay. These are chickens. what I've done, or these actually are chicken thighs. What I've done is bought a huge package of chicken thighs. Then I stuck them in the oven at about 400 and cooked, you know, like 12 of them all at once. And then when they got done cooking, that's about 20 minutes on each side. Then after they cooled, I pulled the skin off of them. So there's no skin on these. They're still fat, but no skin. And then I waited till they cooled completely, and I individually wrapped them and stuck them in the freezer. So I always have chicken whenever I need it for chicken soup, because the kids love chicken soup. Okay, so I'm going to let that cook just a couple more minutes, and while that's cooking, I'm going to get some water. And I'm just going to dump it in there. Okay, so I've got like about a half a pan of water here, and it's still, I'm going to turn it up to high, actually, so I can show that to you. And if you look on there, you can see that there's just a bunch of what looks like murky water. Okay, the reason why I need that much water is because I'm going to let this boil and simmer. It's going to boil first, and then it's going to simmer for probably the next hour and a half. And in order to have it do that, I need to have plenty of water in it. Otherwise, I'll just come back later because it'll boil away, and then I'll have to put more water in. So I've got powdered bouillon because I like powdered bouillon. It's just as good as the canned broth. That always has too much, and you always end up with leftovers, and it takes forever to use up, or you just end up throwing it away. So then I have basil for seasonings, and I'm just going to put that in there until about that much. It's like, you know, you don't have to be exact when you're doing this. If you make this and you find out there was not enough basil taste in there, next time put more basil in. So now I've got water. So in here I have my sauteed garlic, onions, celery, carrots. Then I added about 6-7 cups of water. Then about a tablespoon, well, no, not a tablespoon, that's too much, about 2 teaspoons of bouillon, chicken bouillon. Then I'm just going to take my chicken, I'm just going to leave it just like this and stick it in there. Now this is frozen, but it's going to boil for an hour and a half, so trust me, it's going to fall apart and it's going to be fine. Then I'm just going to sit here with my alphabet. I found this in the Hispanic section of the store, but this is alphabet noodles. And these take about 6 minutes to cook. I'm going to add these at the very last. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some in about an hour ahead, about 1/4 of this, because the noodles, if they cook down, they will actually thicken the soup, so it won't be so thin. Alright, so now we're just going to boil that. I'm just going to set a timer to remind me to come stir it occasionally, because you still need to stir it. So I'm going to set about a 30-minute timer. Give it one more last stir, because it's about ready to boil. And then we'll be back. Okay, so the pot of soup is now starting to boil. Okay, and so what I'm going to do now at this point, after it's boiled, and it took about 2 or 3 minutes to actually boil. You can see all that here. I'm going to turn this down to about 5, which is halfway, you know, medium-high range, because I don't want it to boil over. I don't need to boil it that much, but I do definitely need to have a high simmering boil. And if that gets to be too much, then I'm going to turn it down just a tad bit more. But I'm going to leave this for at least 30 minutes, stir it, and then check on it, maybe add some more water if needed, and then bring it back up to a boil and simmer it again for another 30 minutes. Okay, so the timer's gone off after 30 minutes. I'm going to come in here and check on this. And everything's cooking really nicely. The chicken is still in one piece. So usually I don't have to break that up. It breaks up by itself. But I'll let it go ahead and cook some more. And if it doesn't break up by itself, then I will break it up. I also forgot to mention that this is a bone-in chicken thigh. So we get some extra flavor from the bone that's in there. So I'm going to set the timer for another 30 minutes and I'll come back and check. Okay, so I put in another cup of water because it boils down a little bit. more and it's been another 30 minutes here. So it's been a full hour cooking on like medium-high heat to keep it at a boil. The chicken thighs aren't breaking down, so I'm going to go ahead and break them down. So I'm going to take these out. I'm going to take 2 forks because this is hot and we don't really want to touch it with our fingers. And I'm just going to pull it apart. You can see how actually that's being real easy to pull apart. It's not ready to, but I'm just helping it along some. I'm going to take off as much as I can. Okay, hopefully the boiling from the next half hour of cooking will take off the rest of this from here. But you can see I didn't get all of it off. And I'm going to stick this bone right back in there. Alright, so it's been, okay, I put the other chicken in there and let it boil for another about 20 minutes. And now it's time for me to put in a small portion of the noodles. So I'm going to put in probably about a handful. And I'm just going to sprinkle those in there. What those will do, those will kind of overcook. Well, I'm going to put another one in. They'll overcook and they'll turn out kind of mushy, and it'll act as a natural thickener. Stir it up really good, make sure it's still boiling, and this is on 5. Alright, and then I'm going to cook it again for another 15 minutes. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes since I put in the small handful of alphabet soup, and it's cooked up and it's getting kind of creamy. It's broken down, so now it's like a cream soup instead of just a normal regular soup. So now I'm going to put the rest of these in. I'm going to stir it while I'm pouring it in here. The bowl is still boiling, and we want to keep it boiling, so I'm going to stir it in kind of slowly so it doesn't stick together. And I want this to get back to a boil as quickly as possible. Tends to stick to the bottom of these types of pans. I don't use the non-stick pans anymore. They're just disgusting in my point. And so I'm back to the regular old, just plain old sticky pans, I guess you call it. There's a trick to cooking with it, but you know, you get used to it after a while. So I'm going to stir it while it's getting to the point where it's boiling, so that it doesn't stick to the bottom. Because once it starts to boil, it agitates and keeps it off the bottom of the pan. So it's starting to boil again. I'll kind of show this to you. It looks pretty good. So this has to cook for 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to set the timer for about 9 minutes. I'll go with 9 because that's what it usually works at. And then after that, I'm going to let it cool for just a little bit, but I'm going to have it cool in the bowls. So I've got these all set up here. There's 4 of us for lunch today, 3 grandkids and a grandma. So we'll be back in about 9 minutes. Okay, so it's been about 7 minutes actually. It's gotten really thick in here. So this is a nice and thick soup, not one of those wimpy old out of the can soups that don't have any kind of substance to them at all. So I'm going to now serve up, and I'm going to put it to the side and let them cool a little bit. So you can see here, this is what it looks like. Got all kinds of goodness on there. Got the noodles, the little noodles, got all that stuff there, and the chicken, and all of that seasoning and everything. So one thing you got to watch out for is make sure that you don't serve somebody the bone. And here there's actually 2 bones. So when I see that, I'm just going to pull it out, and I'm just going to get rid of it. Then I'm going to do the same with the other one. Now you can leave them in there, it's not going to hurt anything. Just make sure you don't serve it up to anybody. And there you have it. Homemade chicken soup. Took about an hour and a half to make. Well, hour and a half to simmer. About 15 minutes to put together. And I just used 2 chicken thighs and stuff I already had in the refrigerator, and a bag of 99-cent noodles. You can find that in the Hispanic section of those. So lunch today probably cost about $3. Have a great day.